If you knew what really happens at billionaire parties, you'd never see the ultra-rich the same way again. The glitzy ballrooms, the private islands, the carefully staged Instagram posts, it's all a lie, a distraction, a perfectly curated illusion to keep the public mesmerized while the real parties unfold behind locked doors under the cover of absolute secrecy. Guests don't just leave their phones at the door, they're stripped of them. Security ensures that no photos, no recordings, and no proof ever leave the premises. And to guarantee silence, they're forced to sign NDAs so airtight that breaking them could cost them their wealth, their careers, and even their lives. Because if even a glimpse of what happens behind those walls got out, it would shake the world to its core. Careers would crumble, empires would collapse, the powerful would be exposed for who they really are. But no secret stays buried forever. And now, for the first time, we have a look inside. What are they so desperate to hide? And why are they terrified of the truth getting out? Let's pull back the curtain, because once you see it, there's no going back. Let's begin with Silvio Berlusconi's Bunga Bunga parties. These parties weren't just extravagant. They were a disturbing mix of power, excess, and corruption that spiraled into one of the biggest scandals in modern history. At first, it was all whispers, a few rumors here and there about wild gatherings at Berlusconi's lavish estate in Arcor. But as the truth started to surface, it became clear. This wasn't just some high society party scene. It was something much darker. These weren't just ordinary get-togethers with fine dining and music. No, these nights were carefully planned spectacles. Young women, some barely of legal age, were recruited to entertain Berlusconi and his powerful inner circle. They weren't just serving drinks and making small talk. They were part of the show. Dressed in provocative costumes, nurses, nuns, police officers, they performed for the guests. But the real events took place behind closed doors. According to witnesses, these private rooms were where money, power, and control dictated everything. Women were expected to do more than just dance, and those who played along were rewarded. Envelopes stuffed with cash, expensive jewelry, lavish apartments, even promises of TV roles and political favors. It wasn't just a party, it was a transaction. And Berlusconi? He was the king of it all, surrounded by a select group of elites who indulged in the excess without a second thought. And then there were the drugs. While Berlusconi denied it, leaked testimonies and accounts from insiders painted a different picture. Cocaine flowed as freely as the champagne, fueling an atmosphere where inhibitions vanished, and reality blurred into a twisted game of power and pleasure. But the real breaking point came when Karima El Maroug, better known as Ruby the Heart Stealer, entered the picture. The Moroccan teenager was rumored to have been involved in these parties while she was still underage. Suddenly, this wasn't just about wealthy men indulging in excess. It was a full-blown criminal scandal. Berlusconi was accused of abuse of power and soliciting a minor for sex, launching a series of legal battles that dragged on for years. Trials, convictions, appeals. It all played out in the public eye. But behind the scenes, there are no certainties that these parties aren't secretly holding. But Berlusconi wasn't the only one caught up in a world of excess and scandal. If you think his parties were wild, Hugh Hefner's Playboy Mansion took things to an even darker level. Hugh Hefner's Playboy Mansion. For decades, the Playboy Mansion was seen as the ultimate fantasy, a world of endless parties, stunning women, and powerful men who believed that once they stepped inside, anything was possible. But beneath the surface of satin robes, silk sheets, and carefully curated glamour was a far darker reality. It wasn't just a party house. It was a place where indulgence blurred into exploitation, and where Hugh Hefner wasn't just a host, he was the orchestrator of it all. The mansion's parties were legendary. The Midsummer Night's Dream events, the Halloween bashes, each one designed to ooze decadence. Celebrities, millionaires, and socialites filled the halls. Drinks flowed endlessly. And behind closed doors, things got even wilder than the public ever knew. Quaaludes, which Hefner himself called thigh openers, were reportedly passed around, creating an environment where consent became a hazy afterthought. But the real darkness wasn't just in the parties. It was in the way Hefner controlled the women who lived there. Holly Madison, one of his former girlfriends, later revealed that the glamour was a lie. Behind the scenes, women were subjected to strict rules, forced to meet impossible beauty standards, and ranked using Polaroids Hefner himself took. A bad rating meant exclusion from events, or worse, being cast aside entirely. And then there was the psychological control. Women in the mansion lived under constant surveillance. Crystal Hefner, his widow, described how he fostered jealousy and competition, ensuring the women never formed real friendships. They weren't just playmates. They were trapped in a system where Hefner dictated everything: who could stay, what they could wear, and even how much they weighed. And when it came to sex, Hefner was always at the center. Orgies weren't just rumors, they were routine. Insiders described them as mechanical, joyless performances where women were expected to play their roles or risk being discarded. Those who complied were rewarded with status, gifts, and financial security. Those who didn't, they were quickly replaced by younger, more eager hopefuls who had no idea what they were walking into. For years, these stories stayed buried behind the mansion's walls, brushed off as bitter gossip or the exaggerations of former playmates. But as more women came forward, the truth became impossible to ignore. The Playboy Mansion wasn't the paradise it pretended to be. It was an illusion, a carefully curated fantasy that hid a far darker reality. Power, control, and exploitation weren't just lurking in the shadows. They were the foundation of Hefner's empire. And when he passed away, the carefully guarded secrets of his legendary parties finally came to light. The silk robes, the lavish gatherings, the air of sexual freedom. It was all a front. Behind closed doors, it was a world where women were manipulated, monitored, and stripped of their autonomy. The next ultra-wealthy party on our list is Henry Nicholas's parties. Henry Nicholas's insane party. Henry Nicholas had it all: billionaire status, a tech empire, and the kind of wealth that let him live without rules. But behind the glossy image of a Silicon Valley mogul, his private life was something straight out of a depraved, drug-fueled nightmare. This wasn't just a man who liked to party. Nicholas created a world where excess wasn't just encouraged, it was engineered. His properties weren't just mansions, they were playgrounds of debauchery. One home reportedly had underground tunnels leading to hidden rooms, where the real chaos unfolded, far from curious eyes. And it wasn't just casual revelry. These gatherings were carefully designed spectacles fueled by unlimited drugs, high-end escorts, and an atmosphere where boundaries ceased to exist. Drugs weren't just a side feature, they were the foundation of the entire operation. Court documents paint a picture of parties where cocaine, ecstasy, and methamphetamine flowed like water. Nicholas allegedly had entire supply chains set up to ensure that the high never faded, drug couriers ready at a moment's notice, replenishing stock before the euphoria even had a chance to wear off. The result? Nights that blurred into mornings, guests too far gone to understand where the party ended and reality began. But what makes Nicholas's world truly disturbing is how women were treated. It wasn't just about surrounding himself with models and escorts. It was about control. Allegations surfaced that women were drugged without their knowledge, ensuring their compliance in a scene where consent became little more than a forgotten concept. This wasn't an indulgence. This was something much darker, an environment designed to strip away agency, turning people into playthings in a billionaire's twisted fantasy. And if you think this all stayed behind closed doors, think again. Nicholas took the madness everywhere. His private jet, a flying drug den where the party raged at 40,000 feet, luxury hotel suites, left trashed, furniture destroyed, evidence of nights so out of control that staff likely didn't know whether to call in cleaners or the police. But as with all tales of unchecked excess, reality eventually kicked in. The empire of pleasure crumbled under the weight of legal battles, arrests, and accusations too shocking to ignore. What was once whispered about in elite circles became headline news, exposing just how far one man was willing to push the limits of power, wealth, and human decency. Moving on, let's take a look at Jeffrey Epstein parties. Jeffrey Epstein's parties. Jeffrey Epstein's world wasn't just built on wealth and connections. It was built on secrecy, manipulation, and horror. To the outside world, he was a financier who moved effortlessly among billionaires, politicians, and even royalty. But behind the polished image was something far darker, a carefully constructed system of control, indulgence, and exploitation. These weren't just high society parties. They were meticulously planned gatherings designed to keep the elite entertained while masking the sinister reality of what was happening behind closed doors. Epstein's properties, his Manhattan mansion, his New Mexico ranch, and most infamously, his private island, weren't just luxurious escapes. They were hunting grounds. Once guests entered his world, the usual rules of morality and law seemed to disappear. Alcohol and drugs flowed freely, but that was just the beginning. Cocaine, ecstasy, and unidentified pharmaceuticals were reportedly handed out to lower inhibitions. But the real victims weren't there for the party. Many were underage girls lured in with false promises of opportunity, only to be trapped in a nightmare they couldn't escape. Some were groomed, others were outright coerced, and once inside, their ability to resist was stripped away. Unlike the reckless, chaotic debauchery of other billionaires, Epstein's events were disturbingly calculated. Everything was orchestrated. The guest lists, the power dynamics, even the women who were paraded around like accessories. Their presence a twisted form of currency among the powerful men who attended. And then there was Little St. James, his private island, a so-called paradise that became a prison for the girls brought there. It wasn't just about secrecy, it was about control. Surveillance cameras covered nearly every inch of the island, reportedly recording everything that happened. Some say Epstein used these tapes as leverage, ensuring that even the most powerful people in the world were forever in his grasp. For years, Epstein's operation thrived because the people involved believed they were untouchable. And for a long time, they were, until they weren't. When Epstein was finally exposed, the world saw his empire for what it truly was, a system built on abuse, blackmail, and unimaginable depravity. His name, once a ticket into the most exclusive circles, became synonymous with one of the darkest scandals in modern history. Those who once stood beside him scrambled to distance themselves, but the stains of those nights would never fully wash away. Ultimately, Epstein's parties weren't parties at all. They were something much more sinister, carefully staged illusions designed to hide the horrifying truth. It's impossible to talk about dark billionaire parties without bringing up P. Diddy's. P. Diddy's freak-offs party. Sean Diddy Combs was never just a music mogul, he was hip-hop royalty. Private jets, luxury yachts, celebrity-packed parties, his life was the definition of excess. But behind the flashing lights and million-dollar celebrations, something far more sinister was happening. For years, rumors swirled about Diddy's secret freak-offs. Exclusive, no cameras, allowed parties where the rules didn't just bend, they disappeared. These weren't just wild nights filled with music and champagne. No, these were something much darker. And now, with federal agents raiding his properties and allegations piling up, the truth is finally coming to light. Diddy's parties weren't your typical Hollywood get-togethers. They weren't about networking, dancing, or even partying in the traditional sense. They were designed for indulgence. Drugs, sex, and power games all playing out behind velvet curtains. Held in lavish mansions, penthouse suites, and even luxury yachts, these events were invite-only. And once you were in, you played by Diddy's rules. The music blasted, the alcohol flowed like water, and the drugs, readily available. Cocaine, ecstasy, and other substances were allegedly handed out like party favors. But while some guests were willing participants, others had no idea what they were walking into. For years, people whispered about what really went down at these parties. But now the whispers have turned into full-blown lawsuits. Multiple women have come forward describing a nightmare scenario, being lured in with promises of opportunity, only to find themselves drugged, coerced, and in some cases, filmed without their consent. The allegations paint a horrifying picture. Young women, some reportedly underage, were brought in under false pretenses. Drinks were spiked, substances were slipped into cocktails, And once their senses were dulled, they were easy prey for the powerful men in attendance. Some claim they were physically unable to resist, waking up the next day with no memory of what had happened. And the worst part? Some of these encounters were allegedly recorded, secretly without consent, used as leverage or trophies of the night's entertainment. If there's one detail that left everyone speechless, it's the bizarre connection to baby oil. When federal agents raided Diddy's properties, they reportedly seized over 1,000 bottles of the stuff. At first, it sounded too absurd to be true, but insiders quickly confirmed this wasn't for innocent massages. The baby oil was part of a twisted ritual. Women were allegedly forced into humiliating, degrading situations while Diddy and his inner circle watched. It was a sick game, and they controlled every move. The sheer volume of baby oil found during the raids became a viral sensation, with social media exploding in shock. Nigerian-American artist Speed Darlington even made a song mocking the absurdity of it all. But beneath the jokes and memes, the reality is horrifying. For decades, Diddy was untouchable. He was too powerful, too connected, but even his empire couldn't keep the truth buried forever. Now the lawsuits are piling up. He's facing allegations of sex trafficking, racketeering, and transporting women for prostitution. On March 14, 2025, he stood before a judge in Manhattan, pleading not guilty. But the evidence against him is overwhelming. The FBI has stacks of files, testimonies from former insiders, and footage seized from his properties. The people who once protected him are now turning against him, and if convicted, he could be facing decades behind bars.